Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, and Happy New Year to all Gagglers. Welcome. Let's hope that this year will be brighter and more pleasing than 2024.
Try as you may, George. Try as you may. Okay.
Exactly. But on a fairly dismal note, as of 8 a.m. Moscow time, all gas flows from Russia to Europe have ceased.
In the
Uh,
middle of winter.
exactly in the middle of winter. Now, this has come about because Ukraine has said that it's not going to take part in transiting Russian gas and said that, well, we will do it, but only so long as Russia doesn't receive any payments. So in other words, the payments are just going to be put into a bank account and later to be distributed to Ukraine. So as business deals go, performing a service and not getting paid for it, it's just not really a viable plan. I mean, it never has turned out to be a viable plan.
It's not a common practice, that's
Not a
for sure.
common practice. So therefore, that's no more gas coming from Russia because already Nord Stream has gone, and the only other source of gas, or at least pipeline gas, is through Turk Stream, and Hungary receives that gas, and obviously Turkey receives the gas, and Serbia and Bulgaria receive it, but that capacity is quite limited. So Slovakia has been very, very unhappy about this. And last week, Robert Fico flew to Moscow to see if he could work something out. But there's not really that much you can work out. I mean, if Ukraine is refusing to allow its territory for transiting Russian gas, and I don't know how else you can get the gas. Now, there are other ways of doing it. I mean, there's the liquefied natural gas. Russia sells liquefied natural gas. And then, of course, there's other sources. But all of that is kind of fairly booked up. There isn't really any spare capacity. And in the meantime, also, Moldova is not getting any gas either. There, it's a,
Well, everybody, before we move forward, we have to explain why. Unlike the fools in Europe, Russia had long-term contracts. These contracts have expired. Russia was willing to renew these contracts. I don't know under what terms and conditions, because every time you sign a new contract, it slightly changes. But it's not Russia turned it off. Is that it's no longer requested by the buyer, or the transit country, in this case in Ukraine. And so that it's a unilateral decision, putting the fate of Slovakia, Hungary, and other countries. They have to face the fate accompli of the Ukrainians. This has nothing to do with Gazprom. Gazprom was more than willing, and there were negotiations going on for months. It didn't make the news very much, but they were going on. We knew that this crisis was coming. And so Ukraine has a veto over Europe's energy security. That's where
right.
we stand.
Oh, that's right. But Moldova is a slightly different case because Moldova just hasn't paid its bills. And so Russia has turned that off.
Well,
Um,
they did propose, I don't have the numbers in front of me. They did propose that they would pay 10% of their debt.
mhm.
Okay. And Gazprom said, nah, I don't think so.
Well,
10.
because the way it works, I mean, is that Russia has said that you owe us 800 million
And I said, it's
euros.
hundreds.
And
Hundreds.
Moldova said, "Now we owe you 8 million euros." And so they said, "We'll pay you the 8 million euros." But that's a big difference. I mean, 800 million, 8 million. And so they said, "No, that's not that
Well,
is
and plus the Moldovan foreign minister, this really it really stuck out for me. He said, I'm paraphrasing everyone, pursuing our values and our Euro aspirations, we're willing to make a sacrifice. No, here's a guy that we don't even know if he lives in Moldova full time. And being the foreign minister, he probably has some pretty nice digs. So I'm sure he's not going to get cold in the
Right,
winter.
right,
Okay, it's easy for him to talk about his values, mimicking his masters in Brussels, and the rest of the country suffers. Again, George and I point out endlessly, Moldova is a tragically poor country, and now it just got poorer.
right. And but the interesting thing is that the gas that Moldova receives actually goes to Transnistria, to the power station, the Kuchurgan power station, and then there it's converted into power, which is then sold to Moldova. So essentially, basically now Transnistria is not going to get any gas, and the remainder of Moldova isn't going to get any gas. So that's that. Now, Fico, the Slovak leader, said that well, he will retaliate maybe against Ukraine. He's not going to sell electricity anymore. So, but it's but interesting there again. I mean, Ukraine said, okay, well, we'll get our electricity from somewhere else. And then basically, Ukraine is also saying no to 1 billion euros of transit fees, which is not an insignificant sum that it's now saying no to. But of course, because this money is just being poured into Ukraine without anyone even bothering to do any kind of checking or auditing, it's like, okay, fine, we'll send you that's why no one actually even says, hey, you could have received, 1 billion here. That would have cut back on our expenses. No, that's fine. We're just going to send it here. So this is not a nice time. I mean, it's like, it is winter. Now the cold weather is here. The Europeans, or the European Commission say, whoa, not a problem. We'll take care of it. We'll see whether they'll be able to take care of it. I wouldn't have thought that it's going to be that easy to take care of.
Well, there've been some cold snaps, and their reserves have gone down. You have to remember that during summer, during normal times, that's when they fill up their storage units, okay, for the winter. And because there've been a number of cold snaps, their reserves are lower than usual for this time of year. But there's always a solution, George. Just jack up the price, okay? And
Okay,
so, I mean, this is like chasing your tail, okay? I mean, energy insecurity includes lack of supply and then exorbitant prices. That's insecurity as well. And Germany is turning into the sick man of Europe. I mean, up until 2014, I think that's a fair benchmark. I mean, they were awash with energy, a lot of cheap energy.
right,
That's why we got all those nice appliances and cars and fancy pens and all that, because they had plenty of energy. Those days are not going to come back anytime soon. And even if they return to a period where there's a great deal of quantity, it'll still be very, very, very expensive. So this is all unilateral. This is all shooting yourself in the foot. Okay.
right.
And then George is absolutely right. I mean, the new Ukrainian representative at the United Nations, well, I saw the number on the taxi. I was like, Germany has to give Ukraine 60 billion euros a year for the next 4 years. Just dictating. Okay. All right.
Right.
Where does all that money go?
Right. Right. No, that's exactly right. So it's interesting now that Hungary and Serbia, which I guess the countries friendliest towards Russia in on the European continent, they're sitting quite pretty because and Turkey as well, because they're still getting their gas through Turk Stream, so it doesn't really, they're not dependent on Ukraine. But of course, Putin has said repeatedly that one of those four Nord Stream gas pipelines is still intact. We can turn it on at any moment and send you the gas via one of those gas pipelines. But the Germans say no. That could relieve some of the pressure. You're going to get through the gas pipelines. Now, in the meantime, Trump has already said, to the Europeans, you need to purchase all of your gas from us. all your gas and your oil, you need to get it from us. And if you don't buy it from us, we're going to hit you with tariffs. So that kind of, rhymes happily with what I guess the Ukrainians are doing, which is basically make the Europeans even more completely dependent on the United States than it is, which is also very interesting because of all the talk about, well, Europe has got dangerously dependent on Russian gas. No, so it's much better to become dangerously dependent on the United States gas, and of course, much more expensive. I mean, that's the rider, which is it's going to cost you a hell of a lot more because it's going to be in the form of liquefied natural gas.
And they don't have the capacity even to utilize those levels of liquefied natural gas. You have to build refining station. They are expensive to make, very expensive. They're energy intensive also to process energy. And it takes a long time to build them. I mean, it's very, very sophisticated technology. So good luck with that. Good luck with that. So now you're faced with a generation of austerity. Well, did people sign up for the EU for that?
Right.
No, they signed up to be prosperous. I remember I was in Poland when they joined the EU.
Right.
Okay, prosperity.
Right.
And you're letting a country like Ukraine, which before 2014, nobody even had heard of,
No.
or if they had, they were dismissive of.
Right.
Okay.
Right, right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. What's I find amusing by the media coverage, and it is very, very distorted and very confusing and deliberately confusing because what they're trying to suggest is that Russia is cutting off gas to Europe. They're saying,
That's
oh,
why I gave the caveat, George.
right,
Yes.
exactly. And that's why when you read it, and if you don't know much about the subject, and we'll have to assume most people don't know much about the subject. They think this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But they say, oh, yes, so Putin, and I think the Times of London has that as a headline: Putin cuts off gas to Europe. It's, hey, what has any of this got to do with Putin? It's you. You have to really read the fine print to say, yeah, this all came about because Ukraine has said that it's not going to renew this agreement signed in 2019. So they're not, and that's why there's not going to be any more gas coming across Ukraine. But they can't really say that because if they say that, hold it, you mean Europeans are going to be suffering through this cold winter because of Ukraine, because this country that we're supposed to make all these sacrifices for and devote ourselves to. This is, the whole of European civilization, Western civilization, global civilization depends on Ukraine, and they're cutting us off from gas in the winter. You can't say that. So you say, it's those swinish Russians. Once again, they're cutting us off from gas.
Well, I guess, you can kind of understand the Ukrainian position. If we're going to suffer, you're going to
Oh,
suffer.
yeah.
Okay?
No,
That's what it is.
yes, of course.
Okay. You want to know what it feels like to be us? Okay. You're going to. All
Yep.
right. And the United States is going to go to the bank on it. Okay. And it's only going to get worse. I mean, I'm glad George pointed this out. There is one pipeline of the Nord Stream. Everybody thinks it's presented as like one huge, it's a series that go underneath. Okay. And one of them still is there. It could alleviate the pressure. But then, that is something I mean, I even remember Condoleezza Rice back in the day talking about the Europeans buying Russian energy, and that's something that they hated. Something that just didn't pop into Trump said or Biden said. This goes all the way back to the Bush Jr. Administration. So
Yep.
that's the big picture, everyone. That's the big picture. It's not about Ukraine. I mean, this has been a boon for the United States in so many ways. And that's why I don't think, and we'll talk about this in another video, don't expect this conflict to end anytime soon.
Right. That's right. That's right.
But I
Yeah.
mean, the broader outlines of this, and it's something that I can remember in the early 2000s is Russia using energy as a political weapon. That's not true. There's no evidence to back that up.
Right.
The Russians want to be paid for their energy.
Right.
Okay, they invest heavily into their energy sector. It's very expensive in Russia because it's so far north. The lifting cost is the highest in the world. I mean, maybe Canada, because it has similar terrain, but it has very expensive lifting costs. Saudi Arabia, I mean, you could go out with a shovel and a bucket and you can get oil, okay? In Russia, it's a lot of rock, ice in the tundra. It's very expensive. And they like long-term contracts. Why? Because you know what you're going to get because you have long-term investments. You
Right.
need to know what kind of money. I don't care if it's going to go up 3% or go down 2%. You guys can play the casino when it comes to energy. The Russians want long-term contracts. They want to know exactly what they're going to have in what year so they can invest in their energy sector. Okay. So the world could have cheap energy, but no.
Right. Yeah, no, that's right. But it's always very interesting that, and this is, again, this goes back a long way, which is that uh, the Western media in particular have always insisted that somehow Russia is using energy to coerce the West. It's blackmailing
The West
the
doing
West. And then, of course, it did that back when, with 2006, 2007, when, Ukraine, oh, look what Russia's doing. Russia is really applying pressure against Ukraine. It's cutting off gas to Ukraine. But of course, that's not what was happening. Ukraine wasn't paying its bills
It was
and
siphoning.
siphoning off the gas. And again, as you said, I mean, Russia has invested an enormous amount of resources into its energy industry, and it does expect to get paid for it. I mean, it's not a successful business model if you don't pay for a service rendered. I mean, so
I
yeah,
I remember it was many years ago. I was on Al Jazeera, and it was about energy politics. And I remember this kind of sinister question. So, can you tell us what Gazprom's long-term strategy is? And I said, I'm not really sure I understand your question, other than the shareholders want to be paid
yeah,
because they invested in it. And the biggest shareholder is the Russian state. They want to get paid.
right,
Okay. Like, why would Gazprom be any different from any other American major, oil major or
right,
European one?
right,
They have the same, they have the same outlook, the same goals, okay, to have a return on investment, not to give it away. I
right,
mean, they in the early 2000s there was people say, well, why do different countries have to pay different? Well, they're called transit fees, okay, and then it's the pipeline. If it's a Russian pipeline, then it's if it goes like to Belarus, for example, okay, it's very very close. So you have a transit that is less and all of this because I remember it was an accusation, well, why do they pay this? And I said because geography, it's different. And there was contemplated, and I think even to some degree implemented in the stands, sending oil there. Well, I mean, they'll give a cheaper price. We can have a military base and all that. And then they realize these elites are just not reliable because if somebody comes in, they're going to cozy up to NATO. They'll cozy up to the Americans. The Russians make all this investment, and then it goes to naught. Okay, so they said no. Forget it. We're going to go long-term contracts for everybody. Okay. And again, calculations are different because of almost Gazprom, which is widely misunderstood. Gazprom is the state oil export monopoly. That's what it is, okay? And it is in the gas business because when Yukos was auctioned off, they got into the gas business. That's what essentially created Rosneft, which is also in oil and gas. I mean, so little. I mean, I can remember during the Russiagate hearings, everyone, what is Gazprom? Is it gas company, an oil company? And she's like, well, you guys are, changing American foreign policy, and creating a very hostile environment in Russia, and you don't even know what its flagship company is. Nobody in the room knows what Gazprom is.
right,
It's extraordinary.
right, right. No, that's right. Now, what's interesting is like you said, you can see Ukraine's point of view, and of course, Ukraine point of view is, yeah, we want to inflict suffering on our, our
Ally.
supporters, our benefactors, so that they know exactly what it's like to suffer. But you'd also have to wonder. Russia has been extraordinarily generous, I think, kind of foolhardy in continuing to sell gas to Europe, because after all, the Europeans are using their industries to provide resources, armaments, shells, weaponry to Ukraine in order to kill Russians. So essentially, you're providing economic support to your enemies. That's a very unusual thing. I mean, you don't do that in war. You basically say, hey, you're helping to kill our people, so we're not going to help you do it. We're not going to provide you with subsidies. We're not going to provide you with energy for your industries. But Russia hasn't done that. And a lot of people, in Russia had said, yeah, you should just cut off everything right away. But Russia hasn't done it. And, the West, but especially Western media, have rather taken it as a natural state of affairs. Well, of course, the Russians are going to provide us with it. That's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to provide us with energy, and we will, of course, use that energy for our factories to provide, weaponry for Ukraine. That's the natural order of things. But of course, it isn't. So again, I think I think Russia should have done this a long time ago. But now, I think the Europeans are going to realize what it is like, essentially, to have no support from Russian energy.
Well, we've been over this terrain before, and I can't disagree with the logic of that argument here. But at the same time, my sense is, I have no inside baseball knowledge of this, is that if the energy is going to be cut, it's your decision, not ours. Okay, and I think that has been the attitude. And Gazprom really prides itself in keeping to its agreements and contracts, okay, even to the point of being kind of Philistine about it. I mean, nihilistic even. Okay, so, but we're here. Okay, we're finally here. Okay,
I think it's kind of
we can argue about how we got here, but we're here.
But I mean, to me, I mean that still seems a very odd
I
way
can't
of looking at
disagree
it.
with you, George.
Yeah,
I can't disagree with you, right? Obviously. Okay.
But it is interesting. I mean, this goes back really when it started, the provision of gas, particularly from the Soviet Union. It really started back in the 1960s. I mean, this was because all the way back. This is when you think of all the political leaders at the time. So this is a very, very much a long-term project. And of course, there were a lot of critics at the time that, hey, this is you're getting
Well, remember the Reagan administration
yeah,
blowing up?
right, exactly. They put the screws
Remember
on.
what year that was?
Was it? Sorry, what was
You
the
remember
question?
what year that was? I can't
That was
remember.
yeah. Well, it was in the early 1980s. I mean, they
Yeah.
started immediately. They were demanding that the Europeans
The Europeans
cut
didn't
some.
blow it up.
No, but
The Americans did.
they said the Reagan people immediately, as soon as they came to power, they began applying pressure against the Europeans because, in fact, again, they signed a big gas pipeline deal. And so there was, I
It was,
mean, the Soviets were
it was
already providing
Druzhba.
gas, but this was a big, increase.
It was Druzhba. That's what it was. The
Yeah,
friendship.
that's right. But what was interesting at that time was that the Reagan administration failed. The Europeans stuck with it. They defied the Americans and they continued with the gas pipeline deal. So despite all the pressure that was applied by the Reagan administration, the Europeans stuck with it. So kind of interesting that even at that moment, when supposedly there was the Soviet threat and therefore Europeans were more dependent than ever on the United States, basically Europeans they defied the Americans. Now, I think one aspect of that, why the Reagan administration just dropped that, was they wanted European cooperation on the missiles, the Euro missiles. They felt if you applied too much pressure on this, the gas pipeline, they might not go along with the stationing of missiles. And I think that was where most of their energy was focused. They were terrified of basically, particularly West Germany, saying no to the Euro missile. So that's why they let it go after a couple of years. Okay, all right, go ahead with this gas pipeline.
All of this is just in the broader picture of it all, George. This is just a fool's errand. You know why? Because there are plenty of places in the world that want affordable energy. Okay. Because, the rules-based order and, all of this nonsense, the rest of the world is moving on, they have their development plans, their 2-year, 5-year, 10-year plans, and it's called creating a better life, a standard of living for their people. And we have known in modern history is that they're the single most important ingredient not your people. It's very important. Your people are important, okay? Energy. That's the ingredient that's going to give you success. And the Europeans have decided that they can defy um, um, uh, economic history and logic, and no, we're going to find prosperity through expensive energy imported from abroad. Okay, okay, all right, and we'll see how that works with the electorate. Okay.
Yeah, well, that's right. And of course, Donald Trump says, "Thank you very much. That's exactly what we wanted from you. Yeah, you get your energy from us. You're going to pay 4 times as much as you were paying before, but this is exactly as it should be. You basically become ever more dependent on us, and that's the way we like it." You've had to wonder why European leaders want to go down that path, but that's a topic for another day.
Well, we may have to have a psychologist on the program, okay, to explain because political logic. There's no political logic to it at all. Okay, there's no economic logic to it. There's no societal logic to it. Okay, it's some kind of pathology that we need to explore here. A Stockholm syndrome. I don't know. Elite capture, possibly, most certainly.
Yeah,
Um, but this is a microcosm of just the lose lose. I mean, you always think, what's a win-win? Okay, that's kind of the liberal mantra. We have to find a win-win for everybody, but this is a lose lose.
right.
Okay, and the Russian energy, it doesn't discriminate. You refine it, and it works.
Right, right. No, that's right. I think at bottom lies this poisonous NATO. I mean, it's like it's their obsession with keeping NATO going, which is why they ultimately have embarked on the Ukraine venture, why they embarked on complete dependence on the United States. All for the sake of NATO. I mean, it goes back. This is a parasitical, poisonous relationship, and therefore that's why it just destroys everything in its path,
Yeah.
including the economies of Europe.
Yeah, but it's aiding, abetting a malignant force at the very center of the body politic. Okay,
Right.
George and I can differ on many points, and we often do, and we often will. But the poisonous source of all of this is NATO and its ambitions.
That's
Okay.
right. Exactly.
All right. This is the first one we've done for the new year and January 1st, 2025. Okay.
Exactly. First,
Congratulations.
yeah.
All,
That's it.
all that
Yeah.
we're here. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. This is Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on Locals, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. Today is Wednesday. I think we're back in the saddle Friday, back to the usual schedule.
Exactly. And then tomorrow, Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, for the first solo live stream of 2025. And the other two dogs said we're giving it a pass. Just we need to take it easy in the new year. So we got another dog joining us and saying, look, you gotta do something about that tip jar. Otherwise, 2025 is not going to be a good year. So if you have a few bobbing lying around behind the sofa cushion, behind the pillows, whatever, whip them out into the tip jar. We're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology, and maybe we'll have happier dogs in 2025. It's going to be a tough
Tough
haul.
sell. Tough
Yes,
sell.
exactly. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye bye.